Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
It is my pleasure to welcome you to our Shabbat Morning Service here at Temple Emeth in Teaneck, New Jersey, and to welcome you and say Bruchim Habaim here in the Rabbi Louis J. Siegel Sanctuary in Teaneck. We have just a couple of notes before we begin our service. If you are joining us on live stream, I'd like to say Bruchim Habaim to you, and I hope that you will follow along as a full participant in our service, including following along with our prayer book, our Siddur, which is called Mishkan Tefillah. If you have a copy of Mishkan Tefillah at home, now is the perfect time to bring it to your computer or your device. If you don't have a copy at home, you can still access one, preferably on a second device, by going to our live stream page at emeth.org/livestream. And then scrolling down to where it says to access the Siddur prayer book and clicking on the link for Mishkan Tefillah for Shabbat weekdays and festivals. That will open up the prayer book in flipbook format. You'll be able to follow along, turn the digital pages, and always be on the right page for every song and prayer. We hope you'll do that. Also, if you're watching us on live stream, we hope that you will identify yourselves and greet your fellow virtual worshipers. Perhaps you'd like to share your name or your location or a Shabbat greeting. Now is the perfect time to do that as we form bonds of virtual community. I'd also like to welcome those of you who are joining us here in the sanctuary. You too should find a copy of Mishkan Tefillah near your seat. And I should mention that because of the Omicron variant, we have reinstituted social distancing here in the sanctuary. So please make sure that you are sitting in one of the open rows. We've closed every other row. And side-to-side social distancing is 3 empty seats between yourself and other people not in your household or your pod. So please make sure that we have enough social distance, that we're taking appropriate precautions in light of the virus. This morning is a special service as part of our one book, one synagogue Shabbaton. And so I'd like to orient you as to some of the things that make this morning's service special. This morning's service draws on the themes from our One Book, One Synagogue selection and After the Fire by Lauren Belfer. The book follows two protagonists who never meet each other. Sarah Itzig Levy was a historical figure, a prominent figure in Berlin's Jewish community in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Susanna Kessler is a fictional character who lives in New York City in 2010. She is already dealing with a divorce and a demanding job when she inherits from her uncle an original, unpublished manuscript of a cantata composed by Johann Sebastian Bach, which her uncle stole at the end of the war. During this morning's service, I'll be referencing the characters and the narrative in the book to help expand on the meaning of the prayers. I don't consider any of these references spoilers, since the book is so complex. This morning's service will include several pieces by Jewish liturgical composers who were active in Germany or Austria during the life of Sarah Levy or shortly thereafter. Louis Lewandowski and Solomon Solzer are the best known of these composers. You will know that you're hearing this period's synagogue music because our accompanist, Tom Mustachio, will set his electric piano to the organ setting, thereby simulating the music as it would have sounded in one of the great European synagogues of that day. The first of these period pieces is also our opening song, Ma Tovu. So I invite you at this time to turn in Mishkan Tefillah to page 192 as we join in Ma Tovu.
Be right
Our service continues on page 194 with a prayer that thanks God for the miracle of the human body. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who formed the human body with skill, creating the body's many pathways and openings. It is well known before your throne of glory that if one of them be wrongly opened or closed, it would be impossible to endure and stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wondrously. Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh chol basar, umafli la'asot. Having thanked God for the miracle of the body, we turn now to page 196, and we offer a prayer which completes our existence, the prayer thanking God for the soul. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai, my God and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Baruch atah Adonai asher biado nefesh kol chai veruach kol basar ish. We turn now to page 214 in our Siddur, which is where we find Psalm 92, otherwise known as a psalm for the Sabbath day. The words of this psalm are familiar to us in the sense that Shabbat is a day in which we offer praise to God and honor God's work of creation. If you look about halfway down the Hebrew of the psalm, you'll see that the bottom section is indented because this part of the psalm is much better set to music. It's known as Tzadik Katamar, and our service continues as Cantor Tillam offers a rendition of Tzadik Katamar by Louis Lewandowski. We continue now on page 223. You shall always be praised, great and holy God, our sovereign in heaven and on earth. Songs of praise and psalms of adoration become you, acknowledging your might and your dominion. Yours are strength and sovereignty, sanctity, grandeur, and glory always. We offer our devotion, open our hearts in acclamation. Baruch atah Adonai el melech gadol ba'tishbachot, El hahodaot Adon haniflaot, habocher b'shirei zimra, melech elchei ha'olamim. Praised are you, sovereign of wonders, crowned in adoration, delighting in song, eternal majesty.
Yitgadal, Yitgadal Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechan u'v'yamechan u'v'chayei T'chol Beit Yisrael Ba'gala U'v'yizmai יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קדושה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה וימרו.
Amen. Please rise if you are able for the Baruch Hu, page 226.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
In the opening scene of the book, two American soldiers, Henry Sachs and his buddy Pete Galinsky, are driving a Jeep through Germany. World War II has just ended and they have one day to explore before their unit is relocated. The two saw some mansions situated amid a beautiful landscape, and Henry crossed a lawn to get a better view. The brilliant, raking light combined with huge gray clouds against a pure blue sky gave off an "and then God created the universe" feel, Belfer writes. Henry wasn't religious and his parents weren't religious, but he had made his bar mitzvah when he was 13, just in case, as his mother had put it. Seeing the light fill the valley, Henry felt a spiritual pull that he'd never before experienced. The spiritual pull we feel when we witness the awesomeness of God's creative power is articulated in the Yotzer prayer. The Yotzer, like Henry's observation, begins by invoking light. It references God in a way that even a secular person like Henry may appreciate at an extraordinary moment. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chokhma asita, mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. How numerous are your works, O Eternal! In wisdom you formed them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Gazing upon the rare display of sunlight or a stunning landscape can remind us of God's creative power, but those happen far too rarely. In the interim, we have Yotzer to remind us that God's creative power is manifest not just at extraordinary times, but each and every day. We turn to page 228 for Yotzer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim. Uvtuvo mechadesh bechol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chokhma asita, mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, ve'al me'orei or sha'asita yafa'arucha sela. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'niskei chulan mehira le'oro. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer ha-me'orot. Love your neighbor as yourself, you said, and light-blinded we saw that inner and outer worlds are one as you are one. You spoke and we wrote. We reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us. As we climbed, fell back, and climbed again, your Sinai of life. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher be'amo Yisrael, be'ahava.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed.
Please be seated. One of the themes of And After the Fire is the complicated relationship between Judaism and Lutheranism. Each has its prejudices, and each evolves over time to reveal a universality that can honor the other. One of the ways the religions are connected is shown when Susanna, a secular Jew, wanders into a church in her New York City neighborhood, enticed by a sign announcing Bach Vespers, preceded by a lecture from a visiting scholar. During the service, the minister, Reverend Mueller, preaches about a verse from Luke chapter 10, verse 27. Though I know very little about the Gospels, the quote nonetheless felt familiar to me. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. It is a rephrasing of Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, which is part of the Holiness Code, and Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, which we know as the first verse of the Ve'ahavta. Martin Luther's teachings contain virulent anti-Semitism and serve to widen the rift between Christians and Jews in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries until it culminated in the Holocaust. But this verse from Luke was a reminder of Christianity's Jewish roots and the many beliefs the two faiths share, beginning with the command to love God. We continue with Ve'ahavta on page 234.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Of all my comments at this service about and after the fire, this one is the closest to a spoiler because it comes at the end. Without giving specifics, I will say this. The project Susanna has been working on has been completed. She has navigated the historical, legal, and ethical obstacles and has successfully completed the task beyond her wildest dreams. Lauren Belfer could have described Susanna in this moment as relieved or joyful or unburdened. Instead, Belfer writes that Susanna had a sense of herself outside time, connected to the past and incorporating it into her present. Then she writes, she experienced a startling perception of freedom, as if her true self were bursting from an outdated facade. To me, this is the perfect introduction to Mi Chamocha. The Israelites are escaping their outdated, burdensome period of enslavement. They break through the waters of the Red Sea, and they too experience a startling perception of freedom. This sudden new circumstance leads them into song. We now turn to page 240 to sing that song together. We continue by singing Mi Chamocha.
The melody that we've chosen to use for Mi Chamocha is an interesting one. Tom came up with this idea, which is that we're going to use a melody of a composer named Lazar Weiner. Many of you will know this melody, especially if you've sung in the choir. You've sung it many times. This melody, you'll wonder, why don't we use the organ sound? Because it will sound like something composed by Lewandowski or Zolzer, like some of the other pieces that we are using with the organ sound to denote the pieces of that time. But this Mi Chamocha was written much, much later, and it perfectly combines that sound that we get with Lewandowski, with Salter, with later you hear Freudenthal, with Nusach, with the traditional melodies of Shabbat. So there's this combination going on, which is why we're going to use the piano sound for this. But you will definitely hear the connections between the two types of compositions.
Mi chamocha b'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nor שירה חדשה, שמחו גאולים, לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו, והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, לעולם, לעולם, לעולם ועד. צו ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל, ובדכנו ממך יהודה בישראל, גאלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל, ברך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We continue now with the tefillah, which is found on page 242. Please rise if you are able for the tefillah.
Adonai sifatai tiftachu fi yagi tehillatcha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGipur v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim, Tovim v'Konei Akol, V'Zocher Chastei Avot v'Imahot, V'Mivi Gula Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo Be'ahva, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham v'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayei hakol atarav le'oshia, Mashiv haruach u'morid hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechayei akol berachamim rabim, Samech noflim v'rofech olim, Umatir asurim, Umikayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha ba'al gvurot, Umido melach, Melech memit u'mechayeh, U'matzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'chayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai Mechayeh hakol.
Nikadesh et shimcha ba'olam kishem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom, kakatuv al yad nevi'echa b'karazeh elzeh ve'amar.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech kol haaretz kivodo.
Adir adirenu Adonai Adonenu, ma'adir shimcha b'chol haaretz.
Baruch kivod Adonai mimekomo.
Echad hu Eloheinu, hu Avinu, hu Malkeinu, hu Moshienu, v'hu yashmenu brachamav la'enei kol chai, ani Adonai Elohechem.
Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion, le'dor v'dor, hallelujah. Le'dor v'dor, le'dor v'dor, nagid God lecha. Le'dor v'dor, le'dor v'dor, nagid God lecha. ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש. ושפחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד God לך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד God לך. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Amen. Please be seated. Paul Mendelssohn was the grandson of the great Jewish philosopher Moses Mendelssohn. But Paul is raised in Christianity, and by the end of his life, it appears he has no trusted Jewish friends. His only Jewish confidant is his physician, Dr. Werner. Paul invites Dr. Werner to attend a concert at his home on a Saturday, but the doctor declines because he observes the Sabbath. This is a surprise to Paul, and he is unsure why. What he realizes in that moment is that the doctor's Sabbath observance is a testament to his character and trustworthiness. It deepens their bond so that Paul feels comfortable sharing with Dr. Werner something he has not shared with anyone before. The next part of our service is Vishamru on page 250, which speaks about the importance of keeping Shabbat. It does not mention that keeping Shabbat will make us trustworthy, but it does say that keeping Shabbat is a part of the covenant that connects Jews to God throughout the generations. In honor of Moses Mendelssohn, Dr. Werner, and all who understand the spiritual advantages of keeping Shabbat, we now join in Vishamru.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam b'rit olam beini u'vein v'nei Yisrael Shabbat bayin afash uvayom hashvi'i uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat bayin afash.
We turn now to page 252, and we read together a passage about the sanctity of Shabbat. Our God and God of our ancestors, be pleased with our rest. Sanctify us with your mitzvot, and grant us a share in your Torah. Satisfy us with your goodness, and gladden us with your salvation. Purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Adonai, our God, grant us your holy Shabbat as a heritage. May Israel, who sanctifies your name on Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, who sanctifies Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Mikadesh ha-Shabbat. We turn now to page 258 as we join together in a prayer for peace. Grant peace, goodness, and blessing, grace, kindness, and mercy to us and to all your people Israel. Bless us, our Creator, all of us together, through the light of your presence. Truly, through the light of your presence, Adonai, our God, you gave us a Torah of life, the love of kindness, justice, and blessing, mercy, life, and peace. May you see fit to bless your people Israel at all times, at every hour, with your peace. Praised are you, Adonai, who blesses your people Israel with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamivarech et amo Yisrael, ba'shalom. Most of the artistic references in And After the Fire are about German classical music, but there is one important reference to visual art. On a Friday night, Susanna meets Scott Schiffman for a date at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She leads him to her favorite painting on display there, entitled Moonlight, Strandgade 30, by the Danish painter Wilhelm Hammershøi, which we are about to put on your screen. You can see the moonlight. Let's wait for a moment. We're going to put it on the screen. Okay, is it also going? And it's also there on the live stream. Now everyone can see the picture. You can see the moonlight without seeing the moon. And Susanna, when she looks at it, feels like the painting is missing a person until she realizes that she, as the viewer, is the person. Seeing this painting made me think of a reading in Mishkan Tefillah on page 145. As we enter into Tfilat Halev, I'd like to share the words with you, for not only do they give depth to the image in front of us, but they also serve to direct our hearts at this moment of introspection. Entrances to holiness are everywhere. The possibility of ascent is all the time, even at unlikely times and through unlikely places. There is no place on earth without the presence. We take a moment for silent prayer. We continue now with our Torah service, Seder Kriyat Torah, which is found in your Siddur, beginning on page 363. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities, to hear, to learn, to revere Adonai your God, to observe faithfully the words of this Torah, and let their children who do not yet know it hear, that they too may learn to revere Adonai your God. We continue in the middle of the next page. Please rise.
V'yava melech hakavod, mihu ze melech hakavod, Adonai tzvaot, u'melech hakavod,
In this scroll is the secret of our people's life from Sinai until now. Its teaching is love and justice, goodness and hope. Freedom is its gift to all who treasure it.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai גדלו לאדוני איתי, ודרו במות שמו יחדיו. לך אדוני הגדילה, הגיבורה, התפארת, הנצח וההוד. כי כל בשמיים ובארץ, כי כל בשמיים ובארץ, לך אדוני המלך, ימין נשיא, וכל לרש.
Please be seated. This week's Torah portion is Parashat Bo. We find it in the book of Exodus, and Parashat Bo picks up in the middle of the story of the plagues that strike Egypt, the plagues that are brought to Egypt because of Pharaoh's stubbornness in not heeding God's command. You can follow along if you're here in the sanctuary. You can follow along with the Torah reading on page 448 in the Torah commentary. And if you're watching us on live stream and you have one of the revised Torah commentaries with you, then you can find the Torah portion on page 406. It's clear from Parashat Bo, even from just the 3 verses that I'm going to read, that the purpose of the plagues is not limited to convincing the Pharaoh that it is time to let the slaves go. There is a secondary purpose, which is to create a historical memory of these events, so that all can see that God conquers Pharaoh, and most importantly, that these miracles and this event and the liberation which is to follow will be told by one generation to the next in an act of historical memory. And so it's important to consider the Passover story within this context of both actions of justice in the moment and actions which presuppose that we will be telling the story for generations to come. And of course, the Passover Seder then becomes the institution which preserves the memory that is described in our Torah portion today. To honor the Torah, we call upon Linda Postkanzer and Paul Rosenberg. Okay, put your hand right there for me. Good. And we're ready.
We're ready? Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Amen. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe bo el Paro ki ani hichbadati et libo vet lev avadav leman shiti ototai ele bikirbo uleman tisaper beoznei vincha ubein bincha et asher hitalalti b'mitzrayim vet ototai asher samtivam vidatem ki ani Adonai vayavo Moshe ve'Aharon el Paro vayomru elav Ko amar Adonai Elohei ha'ivrim ad matai me'anta le'anot mipanai shalach ami vayavduni.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yashikoa, have a seat. Yashikoa. This time our thoughts turn to those in need of healing as we prepare to offer a prayer for healing. For those of you in the sanctuary, the prayer for healing is found inside the back cover of the prayer book. If you are watching us on live stream and you are thinking of someone in need of healing, I invite you to share their name in the chat or comment section of the live stream platform. And if you are joining us here in the Rabbi Louis J. Siegel Sanctuary and you're thinking of someone in need of healing, I invite you to share their name out loud or in your heart at this time. As a congregation, we also pray for healing for our members and our loved ones whose names will appear on the screen in just a moment. We add to those names Lou Luglio in need of healing as we join together now in singing Rifa'enu, Heal Us Now.
Hoshienu v'nival she'ad El karav l'chol karav ach karav l'reyav yish'al. We pray for healing of the body. We pray for healing of the soul. Strength of flesh and mind and spirit, we pray to once again be whole. Oh, please refresh Lehman, heal us now, heal us now, heal us
Our service continues now with the lifting and dressing of the Torah, which is found at the bottom of page 370. Please rise if you are able for Hagba and Galila.
V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai miyad Moshe yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai lai la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la ya la 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 la, ya la 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 ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, I la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la, I
Please be seated. The Haftarah portion is found on page 700 of the Torah commentary here in the sanctuary and page 427 of the revised commentary that many people watching us on live stream have access to. And the Haftarah portion picks up with the theme that Egypt is defeated. And it's not so much about the memory and God's power and things like that. The connection of Torah to Haftarah is, well, if I should state it bluntly, Egypt got what it had coming to it. And so in the Exodus story, it's the plagues that strike Egypt so that Pharaoh will let the Israelites go. In the Haftarah, it's a different era. It's centuries later, and the prophet Jeremiah is prophesying about King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, who is now attacking Egypt. Often I look for the most positive or uplifting or comforting verse of the Haftarah, and having scoured it, well, this week I found none. I guess there's two possible reasons for that. One is that this is Jeremiah, and looking for uplifting and comforting stuff in Jeremiah is just a task in and of itself. It's there, but it's not everywhere. The other is the simple ideology of this passage, which is that that Babylonia, in this instance, is an agent of God sent to attack Egypt, and therefore there is no comfort, no consolation to be found. Either way, we hear the poetry and the angst of Jeremiah in these words, and we continue now with the Haftarah, which will be read by Linda Postganzer.
This is good. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nevi'im tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim ba'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah uv'Moshe avdo Uv Yisrael amo, uv Nevi'ei ha'emet, v'tzedek. The word which the Lord spoke to the prophet Jeremiah about the coming of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon to attack the land of Egypt. Declare in Egypt, proclaim in Migdol, proclaim in Naf and Tafchanes. I practiced that and it still didn't come out right. Say, take your posts and stand ready, for the sword has devoured all around you. Why are your stalwarts swept away? They did not stand firm, for the Lord thrust them down. He made them stumble. They fell over one another. They said, up, let us return to our people, to the land of our birth, because of the deadly sword. There they called Pharaoh king of Egypt, braggart who let the hour go by. As I live, declares the king, whose name is Lord of hosts, as surely as Tabor is among the mountains and Carmel is by the sea, so shall this come to pass. Equip yourself for exile, fair Egypt, who dwells secure, for Noph shall become a waste, desolate without inhabitants. Egypt is a handsome heifer, a gadfly from the north is coming. The mercenaries too in her midst are like stall-fed calves. They too shall turn tail, flee as one and make no stand. Their day of disaster is upon them, the hour of their doom. She shall rustle away like a snake as they come marching in force. They shall come against her with axes like hewers of wood. They shall cut down her forest, declares the Lord, though it cannot be measured, for they are more numerous than locusts and cannot be counted. Fair Egypt shall be shamed, handed over to the people of the north. The Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, has said, I will inflict punishment on Ammon, of No, and on Pharaoh, on Egypt, her gods and her kings, on Pharaoh and all who rely on him. I will deliver them into the hands of those who seek to kill them, into the lands of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and into the hands of his subjects. But afterward she shall be inhabited again, as in former days, declares the Lord. But you, have no fear, my servant Jacob. Be not dismayed, O Israel. I will deliver you from far away, your folk from the land of captivity. And Jacob again shall have calm and quiet, with none to trouble him. But you have no fear, my servant Jacob, declares the Lord, for I am with you. I will make an end of all the nations among which I have banished you, but I will not make an end of you. I will not leave you unpunished, but I will chastise you in measure. Praise to you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, rock of all creation, righteous one of all generations, the faithful God whose word is deed, whose every command is just and true, for the Torah, for the privilege of worship, for the prophets, and for this Shabbat, that you, Adonai our God, have given us for holiness and rest. For honor and glory we thank and bless you. May your name be blessed forever by every living being. Praise to you, Adonai, for the Sabbath and its holiness.
We continue now as we prepare to return the Torah to the Ark. Please turn to page 374. Please rise if you're able as we put the Torah in the Ark.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשגב שמו לבדו. הודו ארץ ושמיים, וירם קרן לעמו. תהילה לכל חסידיו, לבני ישראל עם קרבו. הללויה, הללויה. כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם, תורתי אל תעזובו. עץ חיים היא למחזיק imo v'tomcha me'ushar deracha daichinom b'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadish Chadish Yameinu Chadish Yameinu Kikedem.
Please be seated. The Exodus story, which crescendos in Parashat Bo, has a clear villain. He is the Pharaoh who, controlled by arrogance and fear, does not release the Israelite slaves, even when his courtiers know that keeping them is futile. The Pharaoh is not two-dimensional like the villain in the book of Esther. On the other hand, he is not portrayed in his full humanity either. He is as much a force to be reckoned with as he is a person who needs to be convinced to change his mind, and he is ever present in the story. In contrast, and after the fire has no clear villain. Sure, there is Count Achim von Arnim, but he is less a villain than a nuisance or a distraction. Sarah Levy's salon guest who offers anti-Semitic insults in the home of his Jewish hostess. More villainous to me is Dietrich Bauer, the scholar of sacred music, who is arrested in his 80s for war crimes he committed when he was 19. But to me, the villain of this historical novel, or perhaps more accurately, the antagonist, is hidden memory. Hidden memory is a thread that ties together the lives of so many people. Henry keeps the manuscript he stole in Germany hidden for 65 years. Dietrich Bauer keeps his past actions concealed for fear of the justice that eventually catches up to him. But the more apt symbols of hidden memory are the two hidden boxes. Reverend Mueller keeps a box of letters under his bed that contains proof that his German family members were Nazis. He is too ashamed of his family's past, even to share it with his wife and children. He knows that keeping those letters a secret cannot undo what his family has done, but at the same time, he is afraid of speaking about it to those who are closest to him. Susanna has several exasperating conversations with her mother, Evelyn, about the relatives lost in the Holocaust. "What family?" her mother replies. Her mother does not even want to disclose her grandmother's maiden name. The pain of losing so much is so overwhelming as to be debilitating, even decades later. When the family home in Buffalo is sold, it becomes the new owners who unlock the secret, returning to Susanna a box of photos and documents that are the missing piece of the puzzle. Parashat Bo seems to anticipate the phenomenon of hidden memory and attempts to nip it in the bud. The second verse of the portion explains the purpose of the plagues, that you may recount in the hearing of your child and of your child's child how I made a mockery of the Egyptians and how I displayed my signs among them in order that you may know that I am the Lord. The lesson of the events is not complete unless there is a knowledge of the events and, moreover, an intergenerational dialogue to interpret them. The Passover Seder is, of course, the institutionalization of this commandment, but as a people we have interpreted this on a communal level. It is why we have spent so much of our communal resources on Holocaust memorials, and why we wish to have open dialogue about anti-Semitism, racism, and other bigotry. But communal values and individual actions are not always the same. The two shoeboxes in this book are intensely personal. They tell the story not of my ancestors or my nation, but of my family. Many of us have such shoeboxes, either literally or figuratively. We can neither expose them nor destroy them, because in some way they are part of who we are. To me, the lesson of the Torah portion is that truth and knowledge usually exalt us. When they do not, we must ask, why not? We must remember that we are to be judged only for our own actions, and that pain is usually easier to bear when it is borne with others. For when we tell our own stories, hidden memories ought not be our villains. Shabbat Shalom. At one point in our story, Susanna Kessler, saddened by her divorce, wondering if she will ever recover from the sexual assault she endured, sits in the sanctuary of a church, looks at the stained glass windows, and begins to cry. Lauren Belford describes it this way: as she sat in the pew and looked around the sanctuary, sunlight gradually spread across the stained glass. The windows seemed ablaze. It was the most beautiful sight Susanna had ever seen. It filled her with a perception of hope and promise. Basking in it, she began to cry. The Aleinu, which we find on page 586 at the bottom of the page, does not mention stained glass. But here in the Rabbi Louis J. Siegel Sanctuary, the only time I get to face our stained glass windows, designed for us by Temple member Harriet Hyams, is at the Aleinu. We are ostensibly facing east toward Jerusalem for this prayer, but practically speaking, I am facing the stained glass. When we begin a service at 10:30 in the morning, especially in the springtime, the colored light is scattered across the bima. Now with the sun higher in the sky, our windows can also be described as ablaze. The Aleinu originally began as a prayer declaring how Judaism is superior to other religions. Later versions have tried to squeeze this particularistic text into a universalistic frame. It isn't always a good fit. But one thing that both Jewish and Christian holy spaces have in common is an innate understanding that stained glass can make an ordinary space feel sacred. As we face the stained glass for Aleinu, I do not expect you to be moved to tears as Susanna was, but I hope you have a deeper appreciation for their beauty. Please rise if you are able for the Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגר עלינו ככל אמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. and after the fire, grapples with the loss of loved ones. In the opening chapters, Susanna sustains the loss of her uncle while trying to understand the unexpected and troubling inheritance he has left her. When we meet Daniel, he is trying to cope with the loss of his wife and newborn son, reconciling it with his faith in God. Both Susanna and her friend Miriam's extended families have lost branches of their family tree in the Holocaust. But the most profound symbol of loss is Sarah Itzig Levy, who lives into her 90s. Her husband dies at the age of 46. She outlives her niece Leah and her beloved grandniece Fanny and grandnephew Felix. And while she is sad, even despondent, we never see her become unmoored or question her faith. The book then gives us several emotional models with which to approach the death of a loved one. It does not favor one over another, but instead portrays each character's response as authentic and understandable. As we approach the Kaddish, I observe that as religious Jews, we do favor a particular set of behaviors as we cope with loss. The funeral, the Shiva, and the recitation of Kaddish all structure the mourning period. These rituals, though modified by COVID, indicate that community is an essential part of feeling comfort. But on the other hand, while tradition can dictate ritual, it cannot dictate emotion. It can only seek to guide. We recite Kaddish in part because it requires a minyan, a community that can offer support. We recite Kaddish not because it guarantees any feeling, but because it is a reminder that God is sanctified in good times and bad. And in that theological statement is the key to opening the door to closure, comfort, and hope. This Shabbat, we remember those for whom we are in the Shloshim, 30-day period of mourning. Joe Katz, remembered by Fran LaBarbera. Lawrence Shongut, brother-in-law of Nancy Miller-Kozaradsky. Sharon Kramer, cousin of Doug Falk. Louis Eichen, father of Richard Eichen. Robert Breitstein, remembered by Lyle and Muriel Breitkopf. Brenda Gottfried, remembered by Emily Steinberg. Marion Hallam, mother of Nancy Walensky. Marjorie Weinberg, cousin of Wendy DeSanti. Jean Kapp, remembered by the Steiner family. Jeffrey Rosenfeld, cousin of Joy Fershine. And Howard Schlechtman, brother of Andrew Schlechtman. We remember as well those whose yahrzeits occurred this week. William Abrams, Theodore Abramson, Benjamin Aronson, Edith Arams, Rhoda Bias, Flora Blum, Etta Blumenfeld, Louis H. Cohen, Ryan Dillon, Jacob Fierstein, Jenny Giaquinto, Bertha Gordon, Rose Haberman, Nathan Halberstadt, Sabine Hertz, Edith H. Joseph, Harry Cantor, Joseph Katz, Stanley A. Kitzinger, Kate Nieder, Lenore Krigsman, George Kurtzon, Laura Lee, Annie Levy, Dorothy Marks, Esther Mitnick, Eugene Nahm, Marilyn Newman, Abraham Pilchik, Simi Portnoy, Sarah Price, David Rager, Bernice B. Robinson, Hilda Salomon, Esther L. Schwartz, Ann R. Spiewak, Edith S. Springer, Ida Stern, Arthur Strassman, Isaac Sugarman, Michael Thayer, Thelma Weiss, Leon West, Harriet Wilson, and Mark Windell. And we remember the names of 6 of the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust. Sarah Vorobajczyk of the Soviet Union, age 61, Yakov Lerner of Poland, age 40, Shlema Fagelman of the Soviet Union, age 40, Esther Steiner of Czechoslovakia, age 43, Marcel Steiner of Czechoslovakia, age 47, and Josef Reich of Hungary, age 58. We remember them all. We take them into our hearts with our own as we turn now to page 598 in our Siddur, and we rise for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba. Ve'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'yizman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mivorach leolam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudsha b'rechu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Ta'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama Rabba min Shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. It is my pleasure at this time to call upon Karen Wertheimer, a member of our Board of Trustees, to offer Shabbat greetings and announcements. While Karen is coming up to the bima, I'd like to again say Bruchim Habaim to everyone who is here for our One Book, One Synagogue Shabbaton in the sanctuary. We have a lunch prepared for you. Hooray! Our first communal meal of the COVID era here at Temple Emeth. So I want to take a moment and thank Linda Postkanzer for arranging all of the details. Well, you know what? Having thanked Linda, we'll now go to Karen, and then I will share a little bit about the COVID protocols for our meal after we hear the announcements. Karen.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Shabbat morning service. On Tuesday, January 18th, our Movies That Matter series continues with Deconstructing Harry. This Woody Allen film from 1997 tells the story of Harry Block, a successful writer who has turned his family and friends' lives into fodder for his books. Due to his novel's popularity, the school that once kicked Harry out has asked him to return for a ceremony that will honor him. The stellar cast includes Robin Williams, Judy Davis, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Christy Alley. Showtime is 7:30 p.m. The Temple Emeth Book Group will meet on Thursday, January 20th to discuss The Third Daughter by Talia Karner. The book tells the story of Batya, a trusting young woman lured from Russia and forced into prostitution in Buenos Aires during the late 19th century. The group will meet at 7:30 p.m. on Zoom. Finally, please join the next B'Yahad breakfast on Sunday, January 30th at 10:30 a.m. The speaker at this hybrid event will be Shira Pomerantz from Project Sarah. A presentation will be held in the social hall with a modified bagel breakfast. The presentation will be simultaneously Zoomed for viewing at home. This program is part of this year's One Book, One Synagogue program. Thank you to this morning's volunteers in the live stream control room. Nikki and Doug Falk are at the controls this morning. And again, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Karen. I'll add that Amanda Eastman was also helping with the controls for part of the live streaming. And so now let's talk for a minute about the lunch that is coming up. So we have put fewer seats at each table to help with social distancing. Everybody is vaccinated. That obviously is an important part of our safety protocols. And we are asking that nobody touch the food themselves until it's put on your own plate. So we have volunteers who are going to wear gloves and masks and make sure that that the food is placed on your plate with tongs or serving utensils, etc. And then, of course, if it doesn't take too long and it's not too cumbersome, it's always better if you want to wear your mask while other people at your table are eating, and then vice versa. That's not a requirement of our lunch. That would be kind of cumbersome to require it, but it's a good idea if you're able to do it. So we have lunch planned. We're going to do Kiddush and Motzi here on the Bima in just a moment, and then you'll be able to enter the social hall for lunch. And lunch includes some desserts that are inspired by the book. So if you read the book, there is not a lot of entree food mentioned in the book, but Lauren Belfer in the endnotes of the book confesses that she loves eating desserts. And so her characters eat a lot of dessert. And so the desserts that are mentioned in the book include apfel, strudel, and is it pronounced sachertort or sachertort? Sachertort. Shows you I haven't eaten it. There's chocolate and marzipan cake. There's other stuff that's mentioned. And so we put it in order to our bakery to be inspired by the book, and we'll see what they have supplied us with.
I just want to say that the only thing that needs to be served to you by our wonderful volunteers are the wraps that we have for the lunches. They are tuna, egg salad, and grilled vegetables. Everything else, Israeli salad, health salad, chips, are all individually wrapped and packaged, so you can take all of them with your own.
Okay, great. Those of you on live stream, the pause was to give a few additional instructions about lunch. Okay, and then it is a separate live stream. We're going to turn the cameras off at the end of the service, but then we are going to turn them back on at 1 o'clock. And if you live within an hour of the temple and you're watching us live stream, you are still invited, if you're fully vaccinated, to come into the sanctuary for a concert that Tom Mustachio has prepared for us to help us experience some of the music that would have been heard in Sarah Itzig Levy's salon. So he has prepared music by Johann Sebastian Bach, Beethoven, Felix Mendelssohn, and very importantly to me, Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel, because in her day, she really did not publish her own music. Some of it went unpublished, and some of her music actually was published under the name of her brother Felix. And so we're going to hear pieces by all of those composers. Tom is going to play all of them, and for some of them we'll be joined by his friend, virtuoso violinist Bella Horvath. So that is something to look forward to at 1 o'clock, both in person and on live stream. And thank you, Tom, for all of the effort you put in, not only to this afternoon's concert, but to preparing with the cantor for our music today. And now we'll turn to Cantor Tillam for our closing song, which is Ein Keloheinu. It is found in the Siddur on page 700, I lost track. No, page 626. And the cantor, before we sing, is going to tell you a little bit about this melody.
I thought it would be fun to look into a little rumor that goes around regarding the melody for Ein Keloheinu. If you're in that music world, the Jewish choral music world, you've probably heard the rumor. The rumor is that Ein Keloheinu is based on a German drinking song. Why? Well, it's kind of a story about a few musicians who were fighting over the years that Ein Keloheinu was composed and published by Julius Freudenthal. And Freudenthal put this Ein Keloheinu that he wrote into a collection of songs in 1843, which was called Gesänge für Synagogen. And he put it in there after having composed it just a few years earlier in 1841. Soon after that, Abraham Idelson, who wrote a book that I know I own and most Jewish musicians, certainly all cantors, own because you are saddled with it the moment you get into cantorial school. It's called Jewish Music in Its Historical Development. So Idelson decided that he didn't really like Ein Keloheinu. It wasn't up to par for him. So he started this rumor very, very carefully by showing that a part of Ein Keloheinu resembled what he called a German drinking song. In fact, what it resembled were two things. The first part of Ein Keloheinu actually resembles a German battle hymn, which you can hear immediately once we start singing it. And the second part of it actually resembles a Lutheran hymn. And many of the songs that came into the synagogue in Germany at that time did resemble Lutheran hymns. The funny part is that all of this music that we've been using organ to show you where it came from and at what time period, all this Lewandowski and Sulzer and the things that we sing every day in our services came from Lutheran music. And so you can kind of hear bits and pieces. Over time, that music seeped so far into the Jewish consciousness that it is in fact sung not only in Reform synagogues, but any synagogue you walk into has these same basic melodies. I would doubt that most people singing them know where they came from. So Ein Keloheinu is super interesting in this way, and the rumor that goes with it has not been dissipated. I'm here to dissipate it for you today, and I think that the much worse offender is ay 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 with the repeating on the high holy days. See, you're repeating right now because it's so ingrained in your consciousness. But I think that that's a much clearer connection to a German drinking song, and yet that has, by simply saying ay ay ay, has become one of the most well-loved Jewish pieces. So, on to Ein Keloheinu, page 626. You all know it, but now maybe you'll hear it just a little bit differently.
Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Mi Keloheinu, Mi Kadonenu, Mi Kemalkeinu, Mi Kemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu.
We have reached the conclusion of our service. We will close with Kiddush and Motzi. If you're watching us on live stream, now is the time to bring your Kiddush cup and challah or bread to your screen. And so I invite you at this time to rise for the Kiddush as we join together.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
L'chaim. And we join together in the Motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
If you've been watching us on live stream, we hope you'll put one last comment in the chat or comment section of the live stream platform. And if you are here in the Rabbi Louis J. Siegel Sanctuary, you have the opportunity, as we conclude our service, to turn to someone near you, wave at them, and say, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much.